And it goes wherever that person goes. And so we might face towards Jerusalem when we pray. We might feel a connection to our synagogue, but really we can pray from anywhere. And the same is true of Shabbat and any other commandments, observing holidays, studying Torah. All of these things relate to me as an individual. But a mezuzah is something that reminds us that our homes are also holy spaces. And a home is central in Judaism. And I know that right now it might feel a little crazy to think of our homes as taking on another meaning and having a holy space. But I think that it's especially important to think about this holy aspect to our homes when they're used for so many mundane functions these days, and that we have the power to create a distinction between the holy and the mundane in our home, and that's represented by the mezuzah on our door. The second piece of framing is that the mezuzah goes on the door of a permanent residence. So it's not required in an office or a business. And it tells us something, I think, about building a home as a part of a Jewish value, and about the home being central to Jewish life, whether you live by yourself, with roommates, with family, with a partner. And mezuzot mark us as a part of a larger community. And it's a public declaration of a Jewish home, and we're connected to the larger fabric of Jewish community, not just in the present world, but like throughout time, that people have hung these as long as the mezuzah has been a ritual. The next piece of framing, number 3, is that a mezuzah is, I think it's an embodied marker of moving through space. It marks a portal between our homes and the outside world, and it's a physical marker of that transition of space. There's a mystical teaching that aligns the portals in our body to the outside world. So your eyes, your ears, and your mouth that connect you to the outside world. And we can think about this in terms of identity. How do I bring my internal self outward, and how do I bring my internal self outward? Who am I out in the world, and who am I in my home? And how do I move through spaces, and how do I notice how a transition of space makes me feel? I think this is also shown by the fact that many people put mezuzot on interior doorways as well. And I think that it brings, again, like a greater sense of intention as I move from my kitchen to my living room to my bedroom. How am I different in each of those spaces, and what am I bringing to each of those spaces? And am I conscious and mindful of what those spaces represent? And finally, the slant of the mezuzah in itself represents a compromise. Two medieval commentators, Rashi and his grandson, Rabbeinu Tam, argue about how you should hang a mezuzah on your doorpost. Rashi thinks you should hang it straight up and down, whereas Rabbeinu Tam thinks you should hang it horizontal. And so, like many aspects in Judaism, we try to do both. And so we hang it on this slant, and it represents a compromise that in turn can teach us something about shalom bayit, peace in the home, a very core Jewish value. And just as the mezuzah leans, we can lean towards each other and create compromise. And I think this is an especially powerful image for interfaith families, that the slants of the mezuzah can represent how both faiths bend towards each other and how the values of both come together in your home. So because I'm an educator, I'm just going to go through these really quickly one more time. We have number 1, the home as a sacred space. Number 2, the connection to community. Number 3, the embodied marker of moving through space. And number 4, a representation of shalom bayit, of peace in the home and compromise in the home. And what I'd love to invite us to do now is to use the chat function one more time, and to think about which of these resonates for you, and to share a 1, 2, a 3, or a 4, which one resonates for you in the chat. And if there's another framing that you like for mezuzah, feel free to share that with us as well. And so while you are doing that, I'm gonna pass things off to Lizzie to tell us a little bit more about Jewish scribal arts and the mezuzah and her connection to Jewish scribal arts and tradition.
Thank you so much. That was great. Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see everyone's smiling faces. I feel like it's been a while since I've been in a group this large, so I'm glad we're able to get together safely over Zoom. And I think this is a very cool mixed space, people from lots of different walks of life and different Jewish communities, so really cool to see everyone together. Before I get started, I just want to say that I am going to have my chat open. So if there are questions that come up for you during that are quick clarification questions, you can feel free to chat me. But otherwise, we are going to have a question and answer session at the end. So just to share a little bit first about me, I'm not a rabbi. I'm an artist. I studied Jewish scribal arts in Israel with Rabbi Dov Lyman, who teaches at Pardes and is one of the few Orthodox rabbis who teaches women scribal arts. And my main purpose for learning was not to make mezuzahs as a career, but to learn more about the alphabet that I love. I came to Judaism somewhat late in life, grew up very secular, couldn't read Hebrew until I was in college, and really fell in love with the mystery of the letters. So I want to show some art that I've made through NirehOr, which Valerie mentioned. This is the first piece I ever made for our Instagram account, NirehOr, and this is my interpretation on the story of creation. So first, God creates light. That's the inner gold circle. Then God separates the sky from the waters. That's the two blue circles. Then land and sea, moon and sun. There are the birds. There's the rainbow of all living creation. And then finally, God resting on the seventh day of Shabbat. So I really try to take complicated Jewish concepts and boil them down in a way that people can both enjoy looking at and also feel like it helps them understand or think of the concept in a new way. They say that the Torah has 70 faces. You can look at it 70 different ways, 70 different meanings. So I took that very literally and created the 70 typefaces of Torah. So here is Torah written 70 different ways by me. And this is just evidence, I think, of my passion for Jewish letters and the alphabet. And the final piece I want to share just to talk about, the alphabet in my work is Shamor and Zachor, this piece right here. So Shamor means keep and Zachor means remember. And I had this amazing light bulb moment when I realized that Zachor could fit inside of the word Shamor visually because there's teachings that we're taught to keep and remember Shabbat. And there's some teachings that was said in the same instant, in the same moment. And so I was very excited when I saw that the Zion of Zachor could fit inside of the Shin of Shamor and that the Chaf could fit inside of the Mem. So this is just to show my approach at the end of the day is an artistic one, but I'm very excited to share with you a lot about Mezuzah and the process of creating a Mezuzah. And we're going to learn a little bit about the spirituality of it, and then I will actually switch cameras and show you how to physically write and what the process is. So first thing we want to go over is what is in the Mezuzah. So for the people who received unrolled Mezuzahs, you can go ahead and look at those now if you want. For the people who didn't receive an unrolled Mezuzah, who got it pre-rolled, here's what it looks like. It should look exactly like this. If it doesn't, we have a problem. There is not a lot of leeway in how a mezuzah can look. All of the words and the letters have to be exactly in this order in these 22 lines of text. So what is actually there is the blessings that come after the Shema, Deuteronomy 6:4 and Deuteronomy 11:13-21. In Deuteronomy 6, you see the instruction, inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And in Deuteronomy 11, you see, again, inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gate. So it's very important that we get these up on our doorways. So it's a very self-referential, the mezuzah is very self-referential. It's talking about itself, essentially, and as well as some of the key teachings of Judaism. So the first time that the word mezuzah appears in the Torah is actually in the story of Exodus, in the story of Passover. So the 10th plague, they're going to kill the firstborn of every Egyptian firstborn son. And Moses instructs the Israelites to put blood on their doorposts, so, you know, the angel of death can pass over them. And this is our piece that I made, sort of representing what were maybe the first mezuzahs, those first moments of the blood, you know, guarding them. And I think this is where we originate the idea of a mezuzah being a guardian coming from. It is a sense of protection. It is almost has a magical quality to it. I also want to show you the back of a mezuzah, because most people have never seen the back of a mezuzah because they mostly see them rolled up. So if you have the unrolled one, you can flip it over. There's two things to note here. The first is Shaddai, which is a name of God. And it's an acronym. It means Shomer Daltot Israel, guarder of the doors of Israel. So it's the perfect name for God to include on the mezuzah, because it literally means guarder of doors. And then on top, in Ashkenazi tradition, you won't see this on every mezuzah, but in Ashkenazi tradition, we write these letters. And if you're having trouble making sense of what it means, it's because it's a code. It doesn't mean anything. So the white text here is what it is flipped over. So, Alex is messaging me that you guys were actually sent Mezuzah written by a Sephardi Jew, so they do not have this on it. But if it was written by an Ashkenazi Jew, it would have this on it. So it's a cipher, it's a code, and each letter, if you move it over, it says Adonai Eloheinu Adonai. So why is that written upside down in a code on top of some of the mezuzot? Nobody knows for sure, but one historical interpretation is that during the time that Jews couldn't keep the mitzvah of having a mezuzah, when it wasn't safe to hang a mezuzah, they would inscribe this code upside down on their doorpost as a reminder of what they couldn't have. And as a reminder that even though it wasn't safe to affix a mezuzah, they were reminding themselves of the mitzvah every time that they walked through their doorway. All right. So let's talk about some of the letters. So the Aleph Bet is like the coolest thing in the world. First of all, alphabet sounds like Aleph Bet because the Jews had the first alphabet. We're the coolest, right? Alpha and Beta come from Aleph and Bet. So it's the oldest recorded alphabet. And not only that, but according to Jewish tradition, the entire world was spoken into existence. So the recipe of the universe is composed of these letters. These are the letters that led to the process of creation. There's a teaching that we posted about on NirehOr, and I have an art piece that I made here on the right, that after wandering in the desert, the Israelites were complaining and homesick, and they're told to wait at Mount Sinai. And in the morning, God reveals God's self, and there's smoking and shaking and lightning. And commentators have said that at the moment of revelation, so in Torah, it says that the Israelites saw the sounds, which is a very cool moment of synesthesia. They saw the sounds of God's revelation. And there's a commentator, the Kli Yakar, who says that every word that came out of God's mouth began to take form and became so tangible that they could see the letters flying around in the air like they were right in front of them. So it's an extremely powerful alphabet, not to be taken for granted. So we're going to talk through some of my favorite letters here. The first is Aleph, the first letter in the alphabet. Aleph is related to Aluf, which means master. People view this letter as the master of the alphabet. It makes no sound, right? It's a silent letter. Its sound is, it's nothing. It's breath. There's nothing there. It's only the vowel that it takes on. Its numeric value is 1, and Judaism is obsessed with ones. We've got one God, don't forget it. And in the Mezuzah, it says definitely don't find more than one. One Torah, one people. Adam, whose name starts with Aleph, was the first human. Abraham, first Jew, name started with Aleph. And the first letter of the first word of the first of the 10 commandments also starts with Aleph. One cool thing about the Aleph actually is that it is constructed of 2 yuds and a vav. So here's an animation I made showing how the 2 yuds come together to make a vav. So of course, nothing happens by accident. So lots of Jewish commentators have a lot to explain about that. The numerical value of 2 yuds and a vav is 26, which is the same numerical value of the 4-letter name of God, Yud, He, Vav, He. So there's more evidence there tying the Aleph to God. Aleph being the 2 yuds come together with the Vav. Sorry if that wasn't clear. They don't make a Vav. And so more evidence tying the Aleph to God. Also, some people think it looks like a ladder, which I think is cool. You have the 1 foot pointing down to the earthly realm, the 1 rung pointing up. And obviously ladders have a lot of, Jacob's ladder. Ladders have a lot of symbolism in Judaism as like our way to try to connect to God. So you could think of the Aleph as like an earthly representation of God, a way that we can try to connect. The second letter is Bet. Bet means house. Its gematria, or its numeric value, is 2. It's the first letter of the entire Torah, which you can see here, Bereshit, in the beginning. And it's a big bet, meaning this is a big deal, what's about to happen. There is a teaching that when God was creating the universe, God had a crown with 22 letters on it, and each letter came before God and tried to make the case for why God should start the Torah and create the world with it. And the bet said, well, the beginning of the word Baruch, bless, starts with a bet. So you should start the universe with me so that all things will come to bless you. And God said, that sounds pretty good. Let's do it. So the bet became the first letter. There's another cool teaching, which I think is awesome and shows that nothing happens by accident. You notice these little flourishes, these little lines that come up on the sides of the bet. On the top left, there's a teaching that they said to the bet, who created you? And the bet pointed up saying, my creator is above me and around me. And they said, well, what's your creator's name? And on the right side, it has a little flourish pointing backwards. So the bet said, who's my creator? What's my creator's name? It's Aleph, pointing backwards to the letter that comes before it. So from these, what seem like simple letters, there is a profound amount of teaching. I want to share about Pei, which is another very cool letter. Pei means mouth, and speaking in Judaism is extremely important. If you think about confession on Yom Kippur, it's not enough to just think you're sorry. You have to verbalize that. You have to, when you pray, you don't just think in your head. You have to mouth the words to make it real, to bring it into reality, to make it actionable. And I just want to ask you guys, when you look in the Pei, do you see in the negative space in the black a letter that we maybe just looked at? A bet. So there is a bet, a hidden bet inside of the Pei, which is a pretty cool thing to see. It's the FedEx logos. It's the FedEx logo of the Hebrew alphabet. My teacher, Rabbi Dov Lehman, has a teaching that the Pei represents God's mouth, and the bet is the bet from the Bereshit of creation. And it being stuck inside of the Pei like this means that God didn't just speak and things moved on, but it's a continual process that the world continues to be created. So finally, I get a lot of questions about crowns, which are these little flourishes. And people say, what are those? Are they random? Why are they there? What's going on? So in terms of letters being kosher, they're not necessary. They're there as decoration, but they're still very important. So the top row of letters here gets 1 crown, and this bottom row of letters gets 3 crowns. So there's a teaching in Manachot in the Talmud that when Moses ascended to heaven, he saw God, and said, you know, I'm about to get your Torah and you're standing here writing all these little crowns on everything. What's going on? He says, Master of the universe, who's forcing your hand that you have to add crowns to the letters, as if someone could force God's hand? And Hashem replied, there will be a man after many generations whose name is Akiva ben Yosef, and he will expound a multitude of laws upon each stroke of these coronets. So, you know, I think this is really beautiful because it's saying that someone one day will be able to understand the mystery of these crowns. And I think that it's beautiful that there are so many hidden mysteries in Torah, that there are so many things that we can continue to find and meaning that we can continue to make. And it's not something that's fixed and set in stone, but something that's ours to discover. So I want to share a few art pieces that I made based on the crowns, based on some inspiration from the crowns. So this says Eish Zara, which means strange fire. I did this in response in NirehOr to the Torah portion that talks about when Nadav and Avihu break the rules and burn incense at the wrong time in the tabernacle. And there's a strange fire that consumes both of them. So rather than the 3 crowns on the Zion here and the 1 crown on the hay, I created fire from the crowns. Another example of using the crowns in art is this. It says Toeva, which means abomination. This was in response to the piece in Vayikra that talked about, that says that a man lying with a man is an abomination. And what I was trying to convey with this piece is my strongly held belief that the actual spirituality and the actual godliness is not the intention, that the way it's been used to hurt people in our present day world was not the intention of this word. And so I used the crowns, right, which reach towards heaven, to swoop around and cross out the word. So in my hope, God is saying, actually, forget about that part. Don't want to get too much into it now. We could do a whole 2-hour-long call on that. And then finally, this is accidental proof that the crowns really do look like crowns. So this is the letter Zion repeated over and over again. And we did it for our calendar. I forget which month, but it was associated with the letter Zion. And then I looked at it and I was like, that looks like the drawings of the coronavirus. And I was like, I kind of didn't want to post it. I was like, because it was right in the heat of COVID. And I was like, I can't believe I accidentally drew like it looks like it's a cell with a spiky crown. And so this is just to say that they really do look like crowns, because as we know, the coronavirus is called corona because it has crown shapes on the outside of it. Great. Whoops. I might have to. All right. Great stuff. So now we're going to talk about how to write a mezuzah and get into the actual writing to show you what that looks like. So the first thing is that mezuzahs are important. If you can't tell from all that we can put into a single letter, you can imagine how important it is then, this ritual object of the collection of letters. So it's taught that Rabbi Meir said, when I came to Rabbi Ishmael, he said, hey, what do you do? And I said, I'm a scribe. And he said, my son, be meticulous in your work, for it is the work of heaven. And if you should omit a single letter or add a single letter, you destroy the entire world. So I just want to open up the chat. If anybody has any thoughts about what could that mean, that adding or omitting a single letter could destroy the entire world, and why that dramatic of a proclamation here from Rabbi Ishmael. People want to type some ideas. He really hated typos. It's like an ecosystem. Okay, cool. Kavanah should be taken seriously. Absolutely. Each letter of the Torah is holy. Maybe God wrote the book and nobody should change the book. Amazing. Great. All great answers. I mean, I think it's almost, you could argue that maybe it's a, just hyperbole, that like, it's very, very serious. Or you could argue that the Jewish people have been the people of the book from the beginning. And we need to be so aware and so conscious of the holiness of a mezuzah that you actually could be destroying the world with that. If you think about the fact that, yeah, I mean, typos are no good, right? If God spoke the world into existence, if God spoke a typo, we could all be walking around with ostrich legs, or something unfortunate. So because of the importance of mezuzah, many scribes will immerse in a mikvah, a ritual bath, before writing. Many will immerse every time before they write a name of God. My personal practice is I tend to ritually wash my hands, make sure that I'm in like a spiritual headspace, probably, pray a little bit if I haven't yet. And then I try to really focus and make sure that I have the right intention. So that's my spiritual approach. So because it's so important, and because Jews love rules, there are a lot of rules for writing a mezuzah. I'm going to go over just a few with you, but there are lots of rules. So the first is intention. You have to take great care to not be distracted. And you have to be writing the mezuzah lishma, for its own sake. So the whole purpose of what you're doing has to be to sanctify the mezuzah, and you have to make a declaration before you write. Every scribe, before putting the quill on the parchment, has to say, I am writing for the sake of the holiness of the mezuzah. You say it in Hebrew, but I'm not going to say it because I'm not about to do it. And if you don't say that, it is not a kosher mezuzah. If you forgot to say that and you wrote 10 lines and then you said, oh my God, I forgot to say the sanctification, my intention, it's not a kosher mezuzah. And that's one of the challenges of why it's so hard to find a mezuzah and why they're expensive is that you have to find a scribe with a lot of integrity, because it is very hard to spend an hour writing something and then realize you forgot one thing and just have to scrap it. You can't go back. The next thing is it has to be written by hand. So you can't screen print a mezuzah. You can't have a robot write it. It has to be written by hand. Also, traditionally, they're mostly written by men. I didn't want to put too much about this in the presentation, and we could talk about it in the Q&A if people want to talk about it more. But, Orthodox Judaism regards mezuzahs written by most stringent Orthodox Jewish communities would not consider a mezuzah written by a woman kosher. And like all things in Judaism, things are changing. There's lots of incredible scribes, female scribes, and gender non-conforming scribes, and people out there that are doing beautiful work. And it's something that hopefully will continue to change. Letters must be written in order. This is another really tough one, because if you have to fit the mezuzah into a certain space, if you have to fit it into a certain line, you can't just go to the end of the word and write a letter in the beginning and, go back and forth to make sure that you have enough space. You have to write it in order. You cannot write the end of the line first. You can't form a letter by erasure. So for example, this is the letter hey. This little foot down here is what makes it a hey. If you get rid of this little foot, it just becomes a dalet. And let's say you accidentally write a hey instead of a dalet, you cannot just erase that foot. It would not be a kosher dalet. You have to go in and erase the entire thing and rewrite the dalet in. So and erasing is not easy. Well, I'll show you in a little bit, but it's not so easy to erase. And you also can't erase God's name. If you make a mistake on God's name, that's it. You have to bury the mezuzah. You can't throw it away. because it has God's name on it, and you can't erase God's name or futz with it at all once you've written it. So that's a tough one. That's why scribes take such concentration when they write God's name. There's a story that a king knocked on a scribe's door while he was writing God's name, and he just ignored it until he was finished, because there's nothing more important in that moment than writing God's name in a complete process, one letter at a time, in a kosher way. The letters must be readable. So sometimes letters look similar, especially when they are written by hand, because handwriting is tough. And when you add in ink and parchment, it gets tougher. So on the far right, you see a yud and a vav. The only difference between the two is about a tiny little stroke, right? And if you see on the left, there's a zayin and a final nun, also extremely similar. In a case where you can't tell what the letter is, what you're supposed to do is go find a kid who can read and say, what letter do you think this is? And you show them the word. And if in the context they can figure out what the letter is, then it's kosher and you're good to go. But if they say, oh, I think that's a vav and it's actually a yud, then it is not a kosher mezuzah and has to be given a Jewish burial, because you can't just go in and fix the letter, right? Because that would be writing it out of order. Now you might be saying to yourself, that's really hard, and it is. These strict rules are a little bit looser for writing a Torah, because you can imagine if you had the in order for a Torah, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of letters instead of 700. So it is specifically for mezuzah, and because they're pretty short, that we have this strictness. Also, letters must be completely surrounded by white space. So you can see here we have this resh and this vav touching. They kind of look like a chet. I once, heard this teaching that a scribe doesn't write letters. A scribe creates spaces. A scribe creates white spaces. So the white space around it is just as important as the letter itself, and they cannot be touching. So this would be a not kosher mezuzah right here because of these touching letters. And you can't form a letter by erasure because you'd be erasing there. There's certain edge cases, like with most things, where if there's a tiny little fleck or something like that, if it's below a certain width, you can make tiny little changes, but it's very hard to know what to do. And I'm actually part of a Facebook group where people are constantly posting saying, is this kosher? What do I do? So there's a lot of cases where it's not 100% clear. And the final thing is you have to actually verbalize before you write a word. You have to say each word. All right, so what supplies are involved? First, you got your parchment, which I will show you shortly. It has to come from a kosher animal. It doesn't have to be killed in a kosher way. So even if you can't eat it, if it's a kosher animal, you can use the skin to make parchment. There's a quill, which is quilmas. I don't know if you can see my camera too, or just my screen, but I'm holding one up. This is a quill without a tip on it. And we have these special tips that we're very lucky are kosher because they make writing much easier. Otherwise, you have to cut that shape into a quill. Sephardic Jews tend to use reeds. Ashkenazi Jews tend to use feathers. I learned on a feather. It's very important that you use a beautiful tool, that your tool be beautiful. Mezuzah cloth, so the cloth that you write on, has lines that are scored into it. I'm holding up to the camera now if you can see, and you can probably see that on your own mezuzah as well. If it doesn't have those, it's not kosher, so you can't just freewheel on a piece of non-scored cloth. Also, there's special kosher ink made of gum arabica there, and gall nuts. I actually had been saying the word gallnut for years without knowing what a gallnut is. And so I was practicing this presentation and someone said, what's a gallnut? And I said, I don't know. So I looked it up, and a gallnut is the reaction when a tree gets punctured by a insect. It releases this chemical. I'm probably not, if someone knows what gallnuts are, please put it in the chat, but it kills the insects essentially. You also need a copy of a kosher mezuzah in front of you. You're supposed to copy. You're supposed to look, read the word, and write. You also need an X-Acto knife, an eraser, and paper towels. And you might say, but why does this matter so much? Why does the special kosher ink matter so much? Well, take a look at our good old Declaration of Independence, right? This document is 250 years old, and you can't read it at all. And Jews care a lot about posterity. We care about our message lasting for a long time. If our mezuzahs look like this, it wouldn't be good. If the Dead Sea Scrolls look like this, it wouldn't be great. So clearly we are into making documents that have a long life. If we're going to spend all this time writing it, they better last a long time. So if you have a mezuzah with faded ink, it's no longer kosher. It has to be black. Same thing is true with tefillin. So now I'm going to end my screen share and switch my camera to the mezuzah cam, as I like to call it. So here is some cloth. And I'm going to show you sort of the process of me writing a mezuzah. So this is just a scrap. It's not full size. It would be much larger if I was going to write a mezuzah, but I'll just show you. So I have my kosher mezuzah here that I'm going to be reading from. So after I wash my hands and feel like I'm ready to go, I would say I am writing to sanctify the mitzvah of mezuzah. And then I would say Shema. So that's the first word. And just to show you on large paper with this calligraphy pen, how I would form the letter. It goes like that. So you generally will do the tops of the letter first to help with the spacing. And then I would fill in the bottom like that. So now let's do it on the paper. All right, so there's a shin, and I can go ahead and add these crowns. Next is a mem. Sorry, it's a little hard to do this with my camera set up. I can't see it so clearly. All right, and then there's a big ayin, and I'm actually going to switch because I'm using the wrong size quill here. There's a big ayin as the final letter. Oh no, see? A disaster! Okay, this is perfect. I couldn't have planned it better myself. So now, what do? Paper towel. There's gonna be a surgical operation going on here. So we come and we try to suck as much of the ink up as we can, like that. Okay, so we would let that dry. And then let me show you what I would do by using an already dried. This is like on a cooking show when they take it out of the oven, it's already cooked. Here's some already dried letters. All right, so let's say I have an issue with this gimel right here and I need to erase it. Well, erasing with sofrut is really scratching. So you take an X-Acto knife and you go in and you just start scraping away. Oh, can't see it. There you go. There are better sounds that exist than the sound of a letter being scraped off of cloth, for sure. All right, so if you have an electric eraser, that makes this process also a lot faster because those are pretty good. But once you scratch away, you come in with an eraser, make sure things are good. And the final step, once it's erased enough and all the pigment is gone, is to go in with really fine sandpaper and sand down back over. It feels, soft, like animal, you can tell it's not paper. It's truly animal hide, and it's very durable. So you can scratch off like that. So that is how you erase. Someone messaged and said, how long does it typically take to write a mezuzah? It takes people anywhere from an hour and a half to 4 hours. And the smaller the mezuzah is, the harder it is to write. That's why, ironically, sometimes expensive mezuzahs are smaller rather than the bigger ones. You might think those cost more. But so let's just start down here with the mem because I messed up there, and this is just a example run. There's a mem for you. And then we would do a big ayin. The two letters that you'll see when you look at your mezuzah that are largest are ayin and dalet, and together those make the word ad, which means witness. We are the witnesses of the commandment to affix the doorpost, and the witnesses of God's creation and God's revelation, and pretty beautiful symbolism there. So it's a big ayin. So anyway, do you have to do it all in one sitting? No, you don't. So you can't interrupt God's name, but you can, or any of the names of God, including like Eloheinu or, Elohecha. You can't interrupt that, but other than that, you can absolutely take breaks. It doesn't have to all be done in one sitting. So I hope that now that you see what goes into a mezuzah, you're feeling a bit more awe for the mezuzahs that you have in front of you, provided so graciously by MyZuzah. And I hope that you feel protected by those mezuzahs, and that you feel all the work and the love and passion that went into writing them by the scribes, whoever they are. And I really thank you so much for letting me share some of my learning. Oh, there's a vegan cloth question, apparently. I missed that. Did someone say, question for the audience, can you use a vegan cloth? It's a great question. Here's the thing. Can you do anything? Matters on authority and whose authority is important to you, right? In Judaism, I mean, Haley, my partner, is a rabbi, so she gets all the time, can I do this, can I do that? It depends on whose word you want to trust and what's important to you. I think, can I use a vegan mezuzah is the same question as like, can I have one written by a woman in the same sense? Probably pretty similar. You could argue that for ethical reasons, the law needs to change. But many people would not consider it kosher if it was vegan. And many people would not consider it kosher if it was written by me. So it depends who you ask, and it depends on what you're comfortable with, and it depends on if it's going to be a mezuzah on your door. I think what matters most is what you feel in your heart and what you feel is right. There's this beautiful concept in Judaism of svara, which is moral intuition, and gemirna, which is education and sort of knowledge of Jewish law. And the idea is that you need both. You don't just need to learn about the letter of the law. You also need to learn about why the law matters and the spirit of it. And so I think you could use that, depending on how strongly you feel, to justify, your position there. Crowns are not required. Can you write in your own Hebrew handwriting that you create if you want to write a mezuzah? Yes, there are some mezuzahs that look like they're written in like chicken scratch. But Hidur mitzvah matters. So making sure that it's beautiful, making sure that the letters are, and there's also lots of different scripts, right? People have different styles. They do the crowns differently. They do the letters differently. But I would say that it really, as long as you can read the, what it says, then it's kosher, as long as you can tell what the letters are and they don't look like other letters. Yeah, we can just, the Q&A seems to be flowing kind of naturally now. So if you have any more questions, you can go ahead and put them here. And then afterward, I'll pass it to Rabbi Sarah. and crowns are not necessary to be kosher. I mean, well, I think there's actually a difference in opinion there. I've heard that like there are some people that just do the crowns, like the really good scribes will have the assistants that go in and add the crowns afterward. But I learned that you can't move on until you've done the crowns, if you're going to include the crowns. So it's still kosher if you forget the crowns. You don't have to like throw it away, but it's good to have the crowns. That's my understanding of it. And if anyone, I mean, Alex might know more on that specifically.
I can't, Lizzie, thank you. This is, by the way, fantastic. And even though I like work, I'm up to my elbows in mezuzahs all day, every day through my regular day job, I learned some wonderful things from what you had to share. So really, thank you. I do want to say, I can't speak to the crowns, but on the question of vegan cloth, it's a really interesting one that I've come across before. And I'll say I have a colleague who is down in, he works at Hillel in Tampa Bay, in Tampa, Florida. And he has a really interesting program called Tikkun Hayam, where students at the Hillel learn how to scuba dive. They go and they clean out trash from reefs and off the beaches and things like that and collect plastic bottles. They then convert the plastic bottles into 3D printer filament, and then they will 3D print their own mezuzah cases, and they offer these to folks in the community along with klafim, some of our klafim. Coincidentally, the entire staff happens to be vegetarian or vegan. And so after a while, they all looked at each other and said, well, we're not really comfortable with using this animal skin as parchment. Could we, come up with a cruelty-free cloth? And for them, the respect and protection of animals superseded the other traditional, rules and halacha of mezuzah klafim. So they went with a really high quality digital copy, a photocopy that they, refer to as a cruelty-free cloth that they, make available. Like Lizzie said, it depends on, what is kind of a priority or most important for you. But in some of my investigations, I was speaking with other, authorities and stuff around the world. There is apparently a way, and it's very difficult, and I don't know that it's been done yet. But as Lizzie said, you have to have a kosher animal to traditionally have the parchment. If you wait until a kosher animal essentially dies of natural causes, so probably it's old, then you can use that skin and make a kosher cloth, and it would be technically speaking vegan friendly because no misfortune happened to the animal, at anyone's hands. It died naturally, and that would be totally vegan. The challenge, however, is that traditional mezuzah, klafim, the parchment, this is another fun fact, comes from, what's the right way of saying this? The skin of very, very young or even unborn cows, basically, embryonic or fetal calves. I don't know exactly how it's arranged and taken, but the reason for this priority, and Lizzie, if you know something different, please step in, is that it has to be very pliable and very supple. It's soft, and it has to be foldable and rollable and everything. And the younger the skin, essentially, the better. And so that's why essentially the veal of calf skin is used traditionally for mezuzah scrolls and whatnot, instead of really old, stiff skin. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I will just say too, if you're in the market to buy more mezuzahs, there are sort of free range cloth providers. It's boutique for sure, but there are ways to make sure that you're buying the most ethical cloth, a mezuzah from the most ethical cloth. You just have to seek it out. It won't be, any random Judaica shop that you walk into. You have to probably order it special online. And I just also want to add a note that while all of these rules that we've been talking about are specifically about the scroll itself, cases are an opportunity to go wild. So there are no rules for cases. They just have to be permanent. It just can't be hanging by a thread. It just has to not get knocked off easily. So that's why you see so much variation in cases. But the problem with cases sometimes is you don't know what's on the inside. And so I would say, I think Alex will talk about this more when you're wrapping the mezuzah, but it's important to get your mezuzahs checked. If it's important to you that you have a kosher mezuzah, and to make sure that that it stays kosher. But whatever type of case, you know, it came with the Great Clear case. We're going to wrap it inside of the art piece if you want, which Rabbi Sarah is going to lead. But there's lots of options there. You can make your own case out of clay. It's a fun activity with kids for sure. So really lots of options there. So why don't I pass it on over to Rabbi Sarah, and if how can a mezuzah become unkosher? If it fades, or sometimes letters will crack. So as it ages, letters will crack. There's also lots of like stories out there of people who've like seen that things have been cracked and like pulled meaning from it. And yeah, it's a very interesting world.
I actually just wanted to show, I have this is from an old set of tefillin. And so let's see if I can get this close enough to the camera that you can see, but you can see that some of the letters have faded a little bit. And that is what causes, it also causes tefillin to become unkosher in the same way, where the letters will fade because of age. These were my grandfather's tefillin, so they're like 80 years old.
Yeah, it's cool that you kept them.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. If you have more questions, you can find me on Instagram at Nireh_or. Please follow us anyway if you aren't, for some Jewish art and Torah wisdom. And I'm happy to answer questions or talk about this. As you can tell, I love Judaism and the alphabet, so I'm here to answer any other questions that people have. But Rabbi Sarah, thanks so much. Passing it to you.
Thank you so much to Lizzie for that beautiful presentation. And I know I learned a lot myself and loved learning about the process. So one of the things that Lizzie mentioned is so important in writing a mezuzah is the intention that's involved. And we wanted to extend that process for you to set some intentions for hanging your mezuzah. The mezuzah is also a representation of guarding us in our transitions, not only our transitions of coming in to our homes and out of our homes or moving from room to room, but also an opportunity to think about the larger transitions we might be going through in our lives. So I want to invite everyone to think about what they want to fill their space with. And that could be different values that you have that you want your mezuzah to symbolize. That could be some values that you are looking for your mezuzah to help support you in a time of transition you might be going through. And your invitation is in a moment to maybe go and wash your hands or take a moment of quiet to set an intention, and then to write down your intentions for hanging your mezuzah and what you want your mezuzah to symbolize, any words or attributes. And you should have also received in your mezuzah kit this beautiful artwork from Lizzie that has the Shema on it. And you are welcome to either write your words of intention on this dedication card, either on the white space or on the back. And this, we have an opportunity when we're done writing our intentions to insert this into our mezuzah case along with the cloth, or to hang this right next to the mezuzah. And so just so you know, the way that this will be, if you put it inside the case, it'll be rolled. So the far right side will be visible with the shin at the top. So just keep that in mind if you are writing on here and if you want any of your own words to be visible or not be visible. So we'll take 10 minutes for that. Lizzie, if you will put on some music again for us, feel free to go to the bathroom, wash your hands, come back, set your intentions, write them down. And a reminder that when we come back together, that you will need your saran wrap. So please make sure that you have that as well, and your dowel and the cloth. So we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. So welcome back, everyone. So I hope you had a chance to set your intention for your mezuzah. I'm now gonna ask Alex if he will lead us and guide us in the rolling of our cloth. And some of you may have one that is pre-rolled, and if it is already pre-rolled, should leave it roll, I believe. Okay, so Alex, take it away.
Thank you, Rabbi Tasman. Hi everyone, I'm Alex from MyZuzah, which we'll talk about perhaps later. So Lizzie did a wonderful job of walking us through all the fun details and the intricacies of the cloth that you have here. It's obviously very lightweight, very fragile, but also very durable and strong. The way that we're going to get this rolled is, first and foremost, before we do any rolling, we want to have all of our things set, just like a good chef. Lizzie had her stylus, she had her ruler, she had her ink, she had all the good stuff. She had her mise en place, basically all ready to go. So before we start with the rolling, we want to make sure that we have our saran wrap properly cut and positioned. I'm going to spotlight in a second my little rolling station here for everyone. So you can see the kind of layout that I've got here all set and good to go. I don't know what kind of saran wrap everybody has, but what you're going to want to do is essentially roll out from the case, put this on there for a second, or from the box of saran wrap, a portion that is about a little bit longer than the cloth itself is. And feel free to do this with scissors, whatever works for you. You know, saran wrap is obviously hard to deal with, but a piece that's a little bit longer than the cloth is. So you've got a little bit of room on either side that will essentially twist up to make sure that there's a good seal in protecting the cloth inside the saran wrap. You're gonna use, if you have a little sliding razor blade, or otherwise just cut across the top there so you get a good piece that's separated. And then what I tend to do, because you don't need a full run of the saran wrap to make it all secure, is I'll take it and I will fold it back over the blade area. And again, make it a little bit larger than the size of the cloth, and cut it again. So we are left with, all right, a piece that is a little bit longer than the cloth is going to be. Not necessarily wider all around, but enough that it will encapsulate the rolled piece of cloth. Then when we finish that, I will kind of put it down flat, get it untangled from itself on the counter. A good flat surface with nothing sticky there, so that I can place the cloth when I'm ready to roll it. I can place part of the cloth on the edge and be ready to roll it right into the saran wrap once it is already rolled into a cylinder. So if everyone wants to take a minute to breathe deeply and wrestle with the saran wrap in front of you. It's a particularly, a lot of good metaphors here for wrangling with all sorts of challenges and things in our lives, and we have to make sure that we're still calm and collected to make sure we can make it all the way through. So when everyone is ready, hopefully in about a minute, we'll do the actual rolling of the cloth and wrapping it in the saran wrap. To give you a little bit of a talk track while you're working on this, I want to just share for a second about MyZuzah. Lizzie mentioned very nicely that a proper cloth, in order to be written in a kosher fashion, all the laws and all the rules effectively and sharply, it'll take between an hour and a half and 4 hours to really do properly. And counterintuitively, the smaller the cloth, the more difficult it is to write, the more expensive it is. I use sometimes as an example, anyone who had when they were younger or bought for someone or seen the necklaces with your name written on a grain of rice, how it's really complicated for a scribe to do that in a very small amount of space and is kind of expensive. Usually names are between 5 and 10 letters. Lizzie mentioned there's hundreds of letters on a mezuzah cloth, and so when you think about the expense that it takes to just write a short name on a grain of rice and multiply that many times over, that's what a mezuzah cloth really should be running you. So the distinction that MyZuzah exists to create essentially is to try to raise the bar and raise people's expectations and tolerance for what they're willing to pay for a mezuzah, because of the sofer behind the mezuzah, that it takes real effort and training and expertise to create something that is not only beautiful but also kosher. And so our standard essentially is to guarantee that every sofer that puts together a mezuzah that is high quality and hudar to our standards, we try to double kind of the going market rate for what we're willing to pay and guarantee the sofer with no middleman at least $40 per cloth, as opposed to the 30 or less that you'd find in a given store. That again was with the middleman included. So do we have saran wrap? We get some thumbs up or some nods on the screen if we're all ready to go. Okay, perfect. So you'll see here we've got the saran wrap. It's hard to see in the screen. It ends right about there. So I'm going to place the tip of the mezuzah, just overlap a little bit on the saran wrap, and take the little dowel that we provided with you. And again, the important thing is the shema at the top here. That's going to be the last thing to be rolled in. That's going to go on the saran wrap side. And so the dowel is going to be placed with a little bit of room on either side, hopefully, on this end of the cloth. Just use your fingers and a good angle here. It doesn't have to be super tight. I want to be very clear that the tighter we go, if you feel like the parchment is scratching the ink, that's no good, because that could potentially lift the ink off of the parchment. So you want to be very gentle, but make sure that it's still tight enough to go to be kind of fit in there. And once you get the first lip, it's really this edge. You just have to kind of lift sometimes up the whole parchment so you can fit the edge underneath the dowel. And then really it should be a straightforward motion just to keep going without losing the tightness, but not crushing it at all, until it is pretty much all set and you've got the shindalad yod is visible on the top there. Once that's set, you don't need to take the dowel out, but just want to lift it up and make sure that you are in range of the saran wrap. Place the cloth on the saran wrap and try to, again, make sure you've got saran wrap on either edge. and very carefully using your fingers. Oh, got away from me there. So re-roll it, reposition it. We'll lift up the saran wrap and make sure that that starts to roll with you. And so on either end, catch it, lift it there. So I've got saran wrap on both edges, and keep on moving forward. So that after a couple rolls, the whole mezuzah is wrapped in saran wrap. And you got free space on either end. It's important that you do not want to roll it so tightly that you end up covering the shindal yud on the outside. That should be visible when you finish rolling it. It's not necessary to see from the outside of the mezuzah, but it should be visible on the inside of the mezuzah case, essentially. So if yours looks like mine more or less now, and you've got saran wrap outside of the scroll and the dowel inside, you can very easily kind of shake the dowel out. So it just slides happily out and doesn't scratch anything. And then what we do is we'll take both ends of the saran wrap one at a time and just twist the mezuzah. Hold the saran wrap in place like a Smartie candy or something like that. So you got nice, tightly wrapped saran wrap on the edge. Sorry if you can see that. Not so tightly that you're going to crush the edges of the scroll. You see it's still retained its form, but tightly enough that the saran wrap is really wrapped around itself. And if you push it gently inside the edge, inside the inside there, you can get the saran wrap to the tail essentially to sit happily inside the cylinder. You do that on one side, then flip it over, and we'll do it on the other side. You can either hold the mezuzah in place and rotate the saran wrap, or hold the saran wrap and rotate the mezuzah until it's nice and tight and snug, and then gently fit it inside the cylinder you have created until it happily sits in there. And your scroll is all rolled and ready to be put inside the mezuzah case. So just a word, it's not necessary or requirement of in any way to have the mezuzah, the cloth wrapped in saran wrap. It's just part of the precaution that we take to help make sure that the parchment and the ink inside lasts for as long as possible. Part of the mitzvah of having a mezuzah is actually that you're supposed to check the cloth, to check the scroll 2 times every 7 years to make sure that it didn't suffer water damage, that bugs didn't get inside and start munching on the yummy parchment, that the ink didn't get too dry and start scraping off and rendering it unkosher in some way. So the saran wrap serves to kind of protect it from all the fun stuff that's in the outside world that the case might not necessarily do. But then when we're ready with that, we have the card that we all kind of wrote on and worked with. All right, Tasman, should I jump on and work on rolling this one too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then if you tell us how to get it in the case too.
Fair enough. Okay. So just like before, we'll make sure all of our materials are ready. So we have these 2 components are ready for us here. And then you all should have your lovely clear plastic case with the shin on the outside. And again, as Lizzie and others have mentioned, the fact the case is clear is kind of irrelevant. It's nice that you can see the parchment and what's on the inside from the outside, but plenty of folks have lovely, beautiful cases. A word of the wise, we have our little logo sticker on the side, which is lovely, but not important. The important piece is down here on the bottom. You'll notice that it says, I'll get that to focus, check me 2024. I referenced earlier that part of the mitzvah is checking the mezuzah twice every 7 years to ensure that it's still kosher. So all of you lovely folks will be getting an email from us in a few years saying, hey, it's time, you're halfway through the 7-year cycle. We will reach out with directions and explanation for how to check and make sure that things are still good on the inside. So just word of the wise, we won't be strangers. Okay, so there is a little plastic plug at the bottom, which should be relatively simple to pop out. On the reverse side, you see this little hole that you can use a nail or something to just gently pop out the rubber waterproof cover so that your mezuzah is accessible and easy to go. So now that is ready, we have the stopper here. You can take your finely rolled mezuzah scroll. If you need to reinsert the plastic saran wrap at the end, feel free. And so we want to make sure that the shin on this side of the paper is what is on the outside as we roll up the mezuzah inside of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to reverse the orientation we had before. So if you take the mezuzah and the paper, And essentially, this is perhaps a righty-lefty type thing, so adjust as your dominant hand requires. I'm going to lay it down so that the shin and shema are both at the top, facing down this way. And then I'm going to line up the mezuzah and the paper. And just like we did before, I'm try to lift up the paper gently so that it starts to roll over the scroll, and then keep on going such that eventually we have a really nice clean roll with all the things you've written on the outside are still there. The black and white lines are more or less lining up, and the shin and the shana on the top are on the outside and quite visible. So take your time, don't worry. But when you're all set, you just hold that in place. And we're going to gently slide that into the case. A little nudge, a push. You can use your dowel if you want to get it up towards the top of the mezuzah. Don't jam it in there because that would be a little bit more strong than we want it to be. And then close it up with the plastic, the rubber waterproof closure at the bottom. And you're set. You got the gold shema on the out, the shin is visible on the outside. And you're more or less set to go. If you think that that you want to reorient, like I probably should get the shin here is on the side instead of the front, I could try to pop it back open again and go in and move things around. A pair of tweezers is probably easy enough, or your fingers if your hands are small enough to fit in there. But that's basically it.
Beautiful work, Alex.
I try.
Beautiful, thank you. And the Shema, the shin on the outside is lined up with my shin of the Shema of Lizzie's artwork. So I hope everyone enjoyed doing that. You can always, if you needed more time to practice the rolling, you can always roll it again later after the workshop today. So I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us today, and especially thank Lizzie Sivitz for all of her teaching and her beautiful presentation, and NirehOr for being our partners with this, and of course MyZuzah. Thank you so much, Alex, and to your whole organization for making this possible and providing us these fair trade kosher mezuzot for us today. Make sure that you follow and stay in touch with not only us, the Tasman Center, but also NirehOr and MyZuzah. You should be getting an email in the next couple days from Valerie just with all of our information so that you can stay in touch with us and some more information about some upcoming opportunities that we have. I just want to bring a couple things to your awareness of what we have coming up. We are working on putting together an art Haggadah for Passover. That's going to be a Haggadah mostly with artwork, maybe a little bit of words, and artist statements that can accompany the artwork. But if you are interested in helping with that, we are looking for people to contribute artwork, as well as a couple of volunteers who would like to help put it together. We'll be using haggadah.com to partner with for putting the Haggadah together, and then it'll be available digitally. So if you are interested in that, please let us know, and you can reply to an email that is going to come out. It looks like there's a question in the chat about the 4 different symbols of the meaning of the mezuzah, and Valerie will include that in the follow-up email so you can have that as well. I'm also teaching a course starting on March 2nd called Cycles and Seasons of the Jewish Year, which is hosted by Hebrew College. It's on Tuesdays, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, and there is still room if you're interested in signing up. It's a 6-week course that will also include mindfulness exercises, creative practice, and learning and discussion. So it will be a really meaningful class. You can also learn more about that at the Tasman Center website as well. The last thing that we are going to do right now is I'm going to ask everyone if you're comfortable putting a word or phrase in the chat of something that was your intention for hanging your mezuzah. It could be one word of an attribute or a hope that you hope that your mezuzah will represent for you. So if you can just put a word or two in the chat, we'll do a little closing ritual to end our time together.
And go ahead, Alex, if you wanted to mention about the bracha card and hanging the mezuzah while people are doing that.
Thank you, Val. So part of having mezuzah is obviously it's learning about all this intricate work and the mitzvahs that it brings to us. But the important part is also to hang it on one of your doors. So with the materials you received, you also have this lovely card which has got you which has a diagram for where to place the mezuzah on your doorpost, the brachas that go along with that. And if anyone ever has questions, our website at the bottom, MyZuzah.org, sorry, on the front, feel free to get in touch with us for any questions about the practicalities of that, or if you know anyone in the world who could use a kosher fair trade mezuzah, we are very happy to supply and offer anyone who might need one.
Wonderful. So now that you've had a chance to put your intention in the chat, if you would like to do so, I just want to lead us in a very quick closing meditation to seal our intentions. So if you'd like to go ahead and close your eyes and maybe bringing one hand over your heart and bringing the other hand over your heart, and just take a moment to breathe in that intention that you set for your mezuzah. And I'll read the intentions that were put in the chat. And just take a moment to breathe in each of these words. Present, feel like home. The pei looks like a face with an open mouth. Sanctuary, love, protection and connection. Peaceful home, peace. With your next breath in, just bringing that intention into your heart. And on your exhale, sending that intention into your space, into the people who are with you physically, into the people who will in the future come into your space. And imagine in your mind's eye that when you are getting ready to hang your mezuzah, maybe later today or at another time, taking a moment to imbue your mezuzah with those prayers and those hopes and those blessings. Taking one more big deep breath in and one more exhale. And when you're ready, opening the eyes and coming back into the space. So thank you again so much to our partners, to Lizzie and Alex, NirehOr and MyZuzah. Thank you so much. We hope that you will stay in touch with us, with the Tasman Center, and we look forward to seeing you another time soon. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.